Hey guys, on this video I'm going to be showing you how to set up the latest version of FreeNAS 11 on a Windows Hyper-V machine. So the first step you've got to do to get this all set up and working for SMB file sharing, go to Google, type in FreeNAS, click on the download link for FreeNAS, and then we'll get started from there. There's a couple of things you do need to get FreeNAS up and running, particularly on a virtual machine or a physical desktop machine. You need 8 gigs of RAM minimum. That's the main system requirement. Alright, so now the FreeNAS is installed, I'm going back into Hyper-V, creating a new virtual machine, put in the name for the virtual machine, FreeNAS test machine, rediverting the location where it's all being saved to the appropriate location that I want everything to be saved in. Setting the startup memory, so FreeNAS requires a minimum of 8 gigs RAM. I have tried starting it with less than 8 gigs, seems to work. Typically they suggest running at least 1 gig of RAM for every 1 terabyte of storage space, and you'll note here I've turned off dynamic memory because I wouldn't imagine dynamic memory would work very well with this sort of setup. So what I've done, being Hyper-V and it's just a virtual setup, I've created only an 80 gigabyte hard drive. The FreeNAS, if you're setting it up on a physical machine, you can easily set it up to run off of a USB stick if you get a high-speed USB 3 USB. And then what I'm also doing is I'm going through here and I'm going to set up some additional hard drives as well to give you some examples of other options that we've got. So one hard drive is not really enough to set up a RAID array, so if you bear with me, we'll go through and we'll create probably about another 6 or 8 hard drives, I'd imagine. And just to set these up, I've set up the first 3 drives just as a standard IDE drive. But you could set the next ones I all set up as iSCSI drives because there's not enough controllers. As you remember, IDE you can only set up 2 controllers, so the rest of them will get set up as iSCSI controllers. Only left it as 1 virtual processing core, so it's running just off of an i7 LGA 2011 4-core 8-thread CPU, and the 1 core seems to be enough just to get it working. But I'd imagine obviously if you're wanting to run it constantly, heavy loads, you'd probably want to allocate a bit more resources than that as well. So that's pretty much how that's set up. You can also add physical drives, so you can directly connect a hard drive to the system. There's a couple of extra steps added in to directly connect the drive, so I'll run through them later as well. So just bear with me, I'll accelerate this process and we'll get all the hard drives added. So as it starts up here, it automatically boots into the installer. And so we just want option 1 here, so install/upgrade. And then we're just going to select our first hard drive. So we'll just press spacebar on that one, click OK, click yes, and then we set our root user password. So you want a secure password for this. I'm just going with standard settings to boot from the BIOS, so you don't seem to need anything other than standard. I have accelerated this process a little bit on the screen, so you're not waiting for the whole thing. I think this is accelerated about 3000%. So FreeNAS is now finished installing. I just removed the DVD drive so it doesn't reboot back into the installer menu on the reboot. And now FreeNAS has started up. Yeah, so from here guys, we just go straight to the web page that's displayed on the web interface there, and log in with the root username and password that you set up previously. Okay, so now that we're logged in, we've got to set our keyboard type, and then it'll ask you to set up your hard drive array. So I just click exit on this one because I don't want to set it up just yet. So this menu displays the name of your server, the version of FreeNAS that you've got, the CPU, your RAM, the date, uptime of the server, and load averages of the server. So next up we're going to hit storage, hit volume manager, type in the name of the volume for the array that we want to create, and then the number of hard drives we want to allocate. So in this instance, I think we're going to go with about 4 hard drives to begin with to create a RAID Z2 array. So it gives 2 drive redundancy. So it'll give us about 160 gigabytes of space. And I'm allocating one of our spare drives, so as you can see DA5 as a spare drive. So if one of our 4 hard drives dies, it'll automatically rebuild onto that 5th hard drive, so it just keeps that as a spare. And as you can see, that array has now been created. So the next step is to create a group account. So, you know, similar to Windows, you've got user groups and then you've got the actual user. So I'm making a group called Power User, creating a username for my first user, so user1, and I'm going to disable the primary group and then add the user to Power Users so that we've got that simply allocated. You do need to allocate a password for your user account for when you go to log in, otherwise it won't work properly. And then we'll go OK. So that's now created the user account. So the next step is to set up a ZFS pool, a ZFS data set on my volume that I've just created. So I guess similar to Windows formatting NTFS drives, these ones use ZFS. So we're creating a ZFS format, setting it up for Windows permissions, and just clicking add on that one to get that set up. So as you can see now, I've got a ZFS pool 1, and then we're going to change the permissions on it to make the owner of the group the power user. So this very simply gives the owner the read, write, and execute permissions, and we just click change on that. So that makes it really easy to set up the permission settings. Next step, I'm going to create SMB sharing of volume 1 ZFS pool. So this allows Windows to be able to access the drive and put the name in for it as well, whatever you want to call it. So in this instance, ZFS pool. And we'll just leave default permissions on. We don't need to play with the permission settings on this one. So there is a step that I've missed in here. You do need to make sure, as I had in that other display there, that SMB sharing is enabled. And in between getting this to work, I did have to restart the FreeNAS box because it didn't work to begin with. And as you can see, just copying over a couple of videos now and it works instantly. And I can manage to copy stuff straight onto the array. So yeah, the most important step here is obviously you need to make sure you reboot the FreeNAS between changing all these settings. Make sure SMB is enabled and set up to start at boot. And then from there, it should all be working pretty much straight away. So that's, in short, how to set up a FreeNAS box. If you guys have got any questions, please feel free to leave comments below. If you'd like to see more of this content, please subscribe, and I hope to hear back from you soon. Thank you.